Welcome everybody to another edition of 5 Minute Adventure. Today we find ourselves in Victoria, British Columbia. We've taken the boat ride across from the mainland and we are here. And today we're going to talk about Emily Carr, one of Canada's most prolific artists. She was born a very long time ago. She was born on December the 13th of 1871. She and her family lived in this house right here known as the Carr House, 207 Government Street. Used to be called Birdcage Street, named after the legislature, which is just a few blocks off to the side here. So let's take some time. We're going to talk about Emily. So this house is now a National Historic Site of Canada. Carr's mother died in 1886, her father in 1888. Her older sister Edith became caregiver for the children. She was number 2 of 9 children that lived in this beautiful house. She moved to San Francisco for 3 years to attend the California School of Design from 1890 to 1893. She then moved back to BC for a short period of time and then off to London to study at the Westminster School of Art. So Emily Carr returned to BC in 1904, where she gave children's art lessons and made political cartoons for Victorian newspaper. She began teaching art in Vancouver in 1906. In 1898, she made her very first sketching and painting trip to Aboriginal villages around Vancouver Island. She was given the Indigenous name Clee Wick, which also became the title of her first book, published in 1941. A trip to Alaska in 1907 made her want to document the world through her art. In 1910, she went to study in France at the Académie Colarossi, forgive me for my mispronunciation, then for private lessons from a John Duncan Ferguson. March of 1912, she returned to Vancouver to open a studio at 1465 West Broadway. Later that same year, she went to several Indigenous tribes along the BC coast. In 1913, she was determined to give up teaching and working in Vancouver, and she came back to Victoria. During the next 15 years, she ran a boarding house called the House of All Sorts, which is this house here that we can see at 646 Simcoe in Victoria. She did very little painting during this time. She did a few pieces inspired by her environment, however. However, art was not her primary drive in life. So Carr began to get recognition for her work in 1927 after a visit from the National Museum in Ottawa, Canada. They invited her to exhibit her work there. She sent 65 oil paintings, and the museum displayed 31 pieces, along with pottery and Indigenous-inspired rugs. Carr was welcomed into the group of 7 after meeting with Vancouver artist Frederick Varley. The group consisted of leading Canadian landscape artists. This ended her artistic isolation and began one of her most prolific periods. She continued to travel throughout the west coast of North America and throughout BC. She held exhibitions in Ottawa, Victoria, and Seattle. Her first solo show was in Toronto at the Women's Art Association of Canada. In 1938, she had her first solo exhibit at the Vancouver Art Gallery, and then at the Tate Gallery in London, England. She traveled to New York, met Georgia O'Keeffe in 1930. Her last decade of work was heavily impacted by environmental changes such as industrial logging and its impact on Indigenous people. She had several heart attacks starting in 1937, 39, and 42. This made it so she couldn't travel, and she shifted from painting to writing. Her first book, Clee Wick, won her the Governor General's Award for nonfiction. In 1942, she established the Emily Carr Trust and donated some 170 paintings to the Vancouver Art Gallery. She suffered her final heart attack and died on March the 2nd of 1945 at the James Bay Inn in Victoria. She's buried here in Ross Bay Cemetery in Victoria. To locate Emily's grave, just go to the corner of Fairfield and Arnold. It's directly across the road in a few steps. You'll see this monument here, and then Emily is right beside. We thank you, Emily, for your time. We thank you for your dedication to your craft and to your art that is still used as an example and an inspiration for artists around the world.